How do I center a whole div? I'm not talking about just the content inside the div. We already know how to do that. How do I center the entire div? Like in this case, I've resized this priority div right here, this yellow priority div, but I actually want it centered. I want it to sort of be centered the way this is centered, like that. How do I apply sort of the center property or whatnot to the entire div? Let's have a look at our code and see what's going on. We've already applied text align center to priority, so we know that that's not going to center the div itself. That's actually going to just center the content that's inside the div. If we want to center the div itself, we need to use a different attribute. What we need to do is we need to go margin, okay? And this might be this might not make sense at first, but let me see if I can try to explain it to you. I'm going to type the words auto. Margin can have different values, and we'll be seeing that in future screencasts. But when you do margin auto on something that has a width, now you have to have a width that's already defined to the element. When you do auto, what you're sort of doing, the effect of that on screen is that it's going to center the entire div. Why auto? Well, see, this is how I remember it. Whenever you have anything that's centered, okay, by definition, something that's centered, say looking at this yellow, div right here, the margin on this side and the margin on this side are equal, right? That's just the definition of centering something, right? The margin on either side is equal, so therefore the stuff in the middle is centered. So I think of it this way. Whenever I type margin auto, I just think automatically make the margins the same. Okay? I don't know if that's what, the powers that be, at CSS, who developed CSS were thinking of, but that's how I think of it, and so hopefully that's helpful to you. So the bottom line is just remember, whenever you want to center a div, you type margin auto. Let's hit save, and let's see what happens. What we're looking here is we're looking for this entire yellow div to shift over and to be centered on our page. So let's hit reload. And that's exactly what happened. We are starting to get closer and closer to this page, and that's pretty exciting. Before I move on, I've sort of been glossing over this. When we look at this page here, we see that this entire section, this is actually quite a bit smaller. It doesn't take up the whole page the way this does. How would we change that? How would we change this section so that this whole thing so that it's nice and small the way this is, and nice and centered, okay? Because it's technically it's already centered, but it's taking up the entire window here. Well, we already know we actually have all the pieces to do this, right? Well, one of the things that we need to do is we need to resize this whole section. We need to resize it and make it smaller. Okay, we know how to resize a div. We know how to change the width of a div because we did it on this one right here, right? The code to change the width is just width colon and whatever the percentage is that you want it to be the width of. So we know how to do that already. And then how do we center the whole thing? Well, we just learned how to do that by using margin auto. But what do we apply that to? Right? It's not really obvious. I could apply it to main. Okay, that is possible. I could add width, a smaller width. In fact, let's just start typing that out. Width. Let's actually, what do we think this is? This is 75%. It's more like 80%. I'm eyeballing it. So 80%, and then margin auto. We could do that. In fact, let's see what happens when we do that. I'm going to go ahead and hit reload. Okay, so that worked, but it didn't resize the footer down here. We wanted to apply this to everything. And why do we want to apply it to the footer? Well, because, when we're resizing this, we would just like everything to stay together. Here's what you can do. What we can do is we can actually add a div that will hold everything on our page. So we're actually going to add a fourth div to our page that's going to contain everything. If I were to draw it out on here, it would contain everything, including the footer. And that's what we're going to call that our container div. And that's a really handy trick so that you can do things like you can center your entire page, you can move things around, you can keep everything nice and neat and close together. Let me show you what that's going to look like in our HTML. All we're going to do here is we're just going to add an opening div here and a closing div down here. And it might seem a little, just think of it as being sort of like the first div inside your body here. We'll put the opening div here, right after your opening body tag, and then your closing div right before your closing body tag. And we're going to give this the ID, ID equals, and we're going to call it container. Just because it's the only purpose for this div is to contain all the elements, main div, which contains the priority div, as well as your footer div. And so let's go ahead and write this down here. We're going to say container, and this, whoa, what's going on here? There we go. Thanks, Text Wrangler, for pointing that out to me. This is what, if we actually apply this with this 80% width and this margin auto to our container div, what do you think is going to happen? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save that, and I'm going to make sure that that's saved as well too. What do you think is going to happen if we just apply the width and the margin auto, this is the centering thing, and that changes the width, to the container div? Okay, well, what I expect to happen is that I expect everything. In fact, let's get rid of that for now. I'm just going to delete that, and I'm going to hit save. And let's just reload this to see what this looks like. Okay, we're back to where we were started from. I want the whole thing to be resized to 80%. Let's start with that. So let's go width is going to be 80%. And let's just start with that. I expect just this, all of this, to switch to 80%. If I hit reload, that's exactly what happened. See, now we've got one containing div that has everything inside it. Now let's center that by using our trusty margin auto. Let's hit save. And let's see what happens now. Now the whole thing's centered. This is starting to look really close to this. I mean, we're not quite there yet, but we're the closest we've ever been. Isn't that cool? All right, so now you know how to center. You need to know how to change the width of divs, you know how to center content inside divs, you know how to center entire divs on the page. That's pretty powerful stuff. I hope that you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.